to my computer. Oh, okay, I think it is.
I see the light, so we're good to go. Welcome everyone to our first Women in Business online gathering for 2020. We appreciate you tuning in as we try a new format so we can continue to support and strengthen each other through encouragement, motivation, and networking. I'm first going to share a bit of history with you. You may not know, but today, September 17th, is actually Constitution Day. It's the birthday of our United States of America government. On this day in 1787, 39 delegates to the Constitutional Convention met for the last time to sign the document created. Me personally, I happen to like the amendments, 13, 14, and 15, but that's for a topic of another day. Also in women's history this month, Helen Keller received the Presidential Medal of Freedom on September the 14th in 1964. On September 20th, 1973, Billie Jean King defeated Bobby "No Broad Can Beat Me" Riggs in the Battle of the Sexes tennis match. And on September the 25th, 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor was sworn in as the first woman U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Let me get that right. Next, I want to say a big thank you to Christy Cox and the Greene County Libraries for hosting our video conference today. Thank you, Miss Christy. In appreciation, I want to provide you some time to speak to you all. So, Christy, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure everyone knows that the library is open. Masks are required. If you don't feel comfortable coming in because of COVID, we understand. You can request materials and we'll bring them to your car. Just pull into one of the designated spots and call and let us know you're there. All material is quarantined for 4 days for your safety. You will not be charged a late fee. We will backdate it, but the standard is 3 days that germs can live on surfaces. So we quarantine for 4 days just to be safe. You need an appointment to use our maker space, our local history room, or any of our computers. But other than that, you can come in whenever you want. Our meeting rooms are not available, and we don't currently have any in-person programming, but we do have online programs if you're interested. And my Books and Wine event will be virtual this year. And I'm just encouraging anyone to participate. You can find out more information about it on our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Be sure to include that information to Donna so that she can send that out in our email blast too, please, along with the other touch points that she's going to go over. So now that I've given the teaser, Donna, go ahead. Got to unmute yourself first, and then we can hear you.
You think? All right, so yes, touch points. A lot of you have already registered, but if you have not, go ahead to our website and register just to make sure that I have the correct email for you. And all of the touch points that get sent to me, I will send out after the meeting today, probably this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. What else? One Legacy Senior Living is having a free lunch today with food trucks. So if after our meeting you want to head out to Legacy and grab something to eat, it's until 2 o'clock, and you can also get a tour of their new apartments and patio homes. Professional Outreach is having a webinar on September 30th. It's How to Thrive in COVID Crisis and Beyond with Mike Anderson. So you can register for that one on our website as well. And you'll need to register for that one definitely to get the Zoom invite for that. What else? Nova Print is starting to make calls to our chamber members. We're getting ready to do a new Xenia map. That the last one was 3 years ago. And so there's advertising space on there. If you weren't on the last map and you're interested, let me know and I will pass your information on to them so that they will call you with the information. And library conference rooms are closed. Ours is open, but there are some limitations. If you have a group of 10 or less, you can use the conference room downstairs. I always clean it before you come in, and I leave the spray and stuff down there, and I ask you to wipe down the table and arms of the chairs before you go. So we're trying to get that open for our members to start using again. And I think that's it for chamber activities that are going on right now. Unfortunately, we're having to watch everybody by Zoom instead of in person. So I look forward to seeing all of you very, very soon. So stay safe and stay well. Back to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Donna and Christy. Appreciate you, ladies. Now for the woman of our hour, Miss Leslie Beavers. She is the Director of Workforce and Business Solutions at Clark State Community College. And she's going to present to us today generational differences in the workplace, understanding, adapting, and moving forward. Please join me in welcoming Miss Beavers to Women in Business. Mike, to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon. You're great at this. You are poised and sound like you could be on the radio or the TV. So you are switching to virtual good. But thank you all for having me today. I am honored to be the first virtual Women in Business presenter. And I did do a version of this presentation with the Xenia Professional Development Committee a while back. So I apologize to anybody who might be seeing this again, but sometimes that's a good thing because you might have learned something then that you have forgotten to put into practice. So this is a scaled down version of the presentation. Honestly, it's about a half-day workshop that we have together. So we have, this is just kind of a taste, a 20 to 30 minute taste of that workshop, but I hope that you will still learn some things, hear some things that make you think, and maybe leave with a strategy or two that you can take back to your workplace. So with that, I'm going to jump right in, and hopefully Christy and I practiced this and it worked. So there we are. So we will get started. Again, as Shannon said, this presentation is Generations in the Workplace. And my name is Leslie Beavers. I'm the Director of Workforce and Business Solutions at Clark State Community College. And I want to give you just a tiny little bit of my background and why I have kind of become our subject matter expert in our department, at least for generations in the workplace. So we got a request for this years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And the way that our department works, we work directly with businesses who are looking for training, and we partner with subject matter experts, which can be our faculty members or outside consultants, whatever that is. We find the person that is an expert and can do that training. And so we got this request, and I spent several days thinking about who do I know that could, be considered an SME in this space. And I thought about it and I thought about it. And one morning, as I was getting ready, because that's when I always have my ideas. And actually one time I was told that was because, side note, this was another women's luncheon that when we're getting ready, we're using all sides of our brains, and that's why we have ideas. So if that happens to other people, supposedly that's the reason why. But I was thinking, and I thought to myself, I think I could do that training. And so I went to my supervisor at the time and told her that, and she said, I had already made that decision. I was just waiting for you to get there on your own. So the reason why being, for those that don't know my past, I actually moved to this area back in 2013. And I was the general manager of Pies and Pints, which is a restaurant at the Green. I moved here when the restaurant opened, well, before the restaurant opened, but it was my restaurant from day one. I was there to help with the construction all the way through the hiring, but I was with the company Pies and Pints for about 5 years prior to that. And at that time, I was in my mid-20s, and it was my one and only time working in restaurants, but I moved up very quickly in the company and found myself in my first leadership position. And my tagline kind of became, I'm a millennial managing millennials. So I not only had to learn very quickly, it being my first leadership position, just how to manage, I was also learning the nuances of the millennial generation because I myself am an older millennial, and we'll get into that range. But honestly, there are many different traits, many different subsections within that age group. I dealt with things that some of us have dealt with or heard stories about, like an employee's father calling me to tell me that he thought his son was working too late on closing shifts, right? How do I deal with this? A parent calling me? Why is he not talking to me? We've all been there or heard those stories. All through my leadership, who were also mostly other millennials. And so I did a lot of studying on my own. I read a lot of books, There was a book back then, and now it's become the tagline, but back then it was somewhat novel, which was the Not Everybody Gets a Trophy book. And that started really breaking it down. And so I did my own research, and through so many years of that leadership, really kind of took this work to heart. So our quick objectives today, and again, this is kind of our abbreviated version of the presentation, but we will define the generations currently in the workforce. We'll talk about barriers and conflict. Then we'll get a little more in depth in Millennials and Generation Z. Honestly, we'll focus a little bit more on Millennials because Generation Z is just starting to really get into the workforce, and right now, those traits are kind of lumped together, even though we know, and we're learning more and more each day, the differences between the two. And very soon we'll be shifting, I think, more focus onto General Z. I think we'll finally kind of get out of the millennial talk and range, because us millennials are getting quite older, and then some strategies to facilitate cross-generational success. So current workplace generations. One thing to remember when you're defining generations, every generation has been through things that have formed who they are as a generation. But at the same time, we never want to stereotype, right? Everybody, people are people on top of each other, you know, but there are certain things that everybody goes through that does define who they become as a generation. And you'll see also that the next generations are formed also normally by what has happened to the previous generation, because those are the generations that become their parents and their guardians. And so there's a whole lot of things at play when it comes to looking at things from a generational diversity standpoint. So active generations in the workforce, and the oldest being our traditionalists, who were born before 1946. And of course, their biggest thing that happened that defined them as a generation, of course, was living through the Great Depression. Their top traits are teamwork, creativity, and that they're task oriented. So the next generation is the baby boomers, and let me backtrack. My dates are from the census. You can find every generation, the date range can sometimes differ by 2 to 3 years on either side. So there's always the chance that these dates might not match up with what you are considering that generation. And that's why, because again, it's a hard thing to define. So by this definition, baby boomers were born between 1946 to 1964. They grew up in a more optimistic time, because their parents did live through the Great Depression. They did push baby boomers to more education, right? Let's work harder to get to that American dream. They also lived through a whole lot of rapid political and social change. And this is when workplace diversity really started to evolve. So baby boomers were the first to use terms such as glass ceiling and equal opportunity employer, etc. And their traits as a whole are normally a positive attitude, they're adaptive, and a very strong focus on individual choice and freedom. So next we have Generation X, born 1965 to 1976. Generation X was, and this was kind of a lead up, right? So the traditionalists really pushed the baby boomers to be successful, to get that education. And then that push became even stronger for Generation X. So Generation X was really the first generation that were what we call pushed toward adulthood. This was your first generation of latchkey kids. This was your first generation who really started flocking to higher education in bigger numbers and really truly believed in the American dream. And if I work as hard as I can, that's going to pay off. But unfortunately for Generation X, right when many of them were getting out of school and hitting the job market, we had an economic decline. And so there was some moments of, I did all the things that I was supposed to do, and now I'm not getting the reward that I thought I was working towards. And so that definitely shaped Generation X and shaped, again, the way that they started to bring up the millennials. And something that I always like to point out in this presentation is, again, this is all very cyclical. It is all, everyone is still a person, and you can't define people by their generations. And when I talk about kind of the way that the previous generation shaped the next generation, nobody from a parenting standpoint has done anything wrong, okay? We all become parents and do the things that we do because at that point in time, it is what we believe is the best for our children. So I just always like to put that default out there that this is a very transparent conversation, and there is no one has done anything wrong to shape a generation, because every generation brings good things as well. So Generation X, their traits can include independence, productivity, and contribution. So our next two generations, and we're going to get kind of more in depth on these in a minute, of course, are our millennials. Again, I've talked already, but that 1977 to 1997, the millennial generation is so large. And so, and I think we're getting to that point, but what people really need to understand is your millennials are your 40-year-olds in your workplace right now. You're 35 to 45 or so. So we have to move past calling all young people millennials, because at this point, it's really more so Generation Z, which were born after 1997. So we'll talk real quick about barriers and conflict. And this is something that I get in a little more deeper in the full day workshop. But, you know, again, much like the parenting default statement, it's very important for team members and for your employees when they're learning about generational diversity to understand that nobody is ever asking for them to change their own morals or beliefs, or nobody is saying that they should change what they've always done to cater to a generation. That is not ever the end goal. The end goal is just to understand the way that different generations understand information, the things that motivate the different generations, and how to work together. So my biggest example for this is showing up to work on time, right? Nobody is ever going to say that, oh, you should just give millennials and Generation Z a pass, right? They just don't show up on time and that needs to be accepted. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is a workplace procedure. That is something that everybody should know. It's more about understanding that they might not have ever been truly given the reason why it's so important to be at work on time. So it's about how do you find those things and then help them understand. You know, I do this a lot in manufacturing, this training a lot in manufacturing environments. And so it's more so, let's work through that conflict, and we'll get, I'm kind of jumping ahead because this is more into what motivates millennials and things, but just having a conversation with them so that they understand if they're late, how that affects the other people that are there that day, how that affects the people who just left a shift or who coming on, etc. Again, under accepting generational diversity does not mean that you just say, oh, that's how they are and we shouldn't get mad about it. It's about actually working through those barriers and conflict. So really quickly, and this part is kind of, I just completely forgot the word I was looking for. I'm going to ask you guys to answer. And I've never done this in a virtual format, and I'm sure everybody's on mute right now. So feel free to unmute yourself and participate. But we're going to talk real quick about generational stereotypes. And I've got 3 examples of quotes about generations, and I want you to guess either the generation that said that or kind of the year that we're thinking of there. So this is the first one, and I'll read it very quickly. A few 35-year-old friends just now are leaving their parents' nest. Many friends are getting married or having a baby for the first time. They are switching occupations because they have finally landed a meaningful career, perhaps after a decade of hopscotching jobs in search of an identity. They're doing the kinds of things our society used to expect from 25-year-olds. So what generation or time frame do you think said this?
My guess is a millennial.
That they're talking about a millennial?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is Not Ready for Middle Age at 35 from 1984. So they were actually talking about Generation X in this specific statement. So here's another one. We defy anyone who goes about with his eyes open to deny that there is, as never before, an attitude on the part of young folk which is best described as grossly thoughtless, rude, and utterly selfish. Any guesses?
I'll go out there and say millennial because they like the term
I'd say
okay
the-
boomer.
So this is actually from 1925. All right, we got one more. They think they know everything and are always quite sure about it.
Is that one Generation Z?
So this is actually from Aristotle in the 4th century. So the reason that I pull these quotes is just to illustrate that generational disagreement has literally been around since the beginning of time. It feels a lot stronger right now in the millennial world because that time frame of millennials is so big that we've been talking about millennials for 30 years now, but every generation, and we're gonna have the same probably reaction to Generation Z as they continue to move into the workforce. This is something that is natural to our human nature, and we've always had to learn how to work through it. So Millennials and Generation Z. So I've already mentioned huge subsection, okay? Your millennials that were born in 1977, 1983, now I just gave you all my age, are going to be very different from your millennials that were born in 1997 because we had different lives, right? I didn't have a cell phone until college and then it was my little Nokia, right? But 1997 millennials have probably had cell phones for much longer than us. So again, it's just very important to remember just how big of a group you're talking about when you say millennials. So at this point, I usually ask people what their definition is. I'm not going to have everybody go off mute and do that, but I have a quote here. And if you don't know Simon Sinek, I highly recommend his YouTube videos, and he does not just generational, but leadership stuff as well. But he did a survey to create a definition of millennial. And these are the top things that came up: narcissistic, entitled, lazy, self-interested, unfocused. And so he broke that down, the perception of those things, to some of the reality. And again, this is not the full thing, but here are some of the things that have really shaped this generation and will start shaping Generation Z. The first, of course, is technology. Okay, we all know how addictive technology is, but it actually is proven that when you are looking at the blue light on your phone, when you are on Facebook and you're getting likes on a post, whatever that is, our brains do release dopamine, which is a highly addictive chemical. So, and it's not just young people, I see people of all ages. I apologize, my clock is letting us know that it's noon, but all people of all ages at this point are pretty addicted to their technology. But we have to think about that, of how that addiction and how that millennials have had that addiction either since college, like me, or possibly even younger with your 90s millennials, that this is something that is deeply ingrained in our brains. And a lot of times when we look unfocused or lazy because we're on our phone, we are truly trying to work through that addiction to our phone. And right now, who knows, coming out of the pandemic, when we've all gotten so insanely used to virtual tools and computers and our phones and our iPads even more, you know, what the ramifications of that will be. But another piece of that is Millennials and General Z really, truly struggle with coping skills and relationship skills because we have grown up so much in the world of technology. The relationships that we build are usually a lot more technology based than in-person based. You know, we keep in touch with our friends on Facebook, but we're not the best at actual face-to-face friendships. And that's all related to the growth of technology along with, you know, as we were growing up. Instant gratification. We're very used to, there's an app for that, or Google, right? Well, we can just get that on Google. Again, that has shaped how our brain works and the way that, you know, in turn, we work even at our jobs. Transactional mentality, you know, we've got short transactions, that's that instant gratification through long term, but we always want to know what the transaction is. And impact. This is so important. We are motivated by the why. So again, in that example I gave about being on time, it's once you explain the why of why it's important to be on time, then we'll get it. Well, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it also feeds into a lot of these other things. You know, another complaint that we hear a lot, right, is the entitled. They come in and they want my job. They come in and they want to be promoted or whatever that looks like. But the reality of that is actually that they are just trying to understand, this goes to that transactional mentality piece, what that transaction is. How long do I have to do this before I'm rewarded? How long do I have to do this before I'm rewarded? And that very well could be a 15-year career, but they need to see that and to understand that so that they know when those transactions are going to take place. Again, motivated by the why, just kind of in everything. Another piece that's not on here, and again, this is normally a much longer presentation, is, I apologize, I looked at my clock and now I lost my train of thought. Is that they want to learn and acquire as many skills as possible. So cross-training is huge for millennials, just because, and again, sometimes people think that they're trying to take my job, but they're not. They just want to know as much as they can and learn as many skills as they can. And again, relationships. I put this other Simon Sinek quote down here. Instant gratification in everything in life except building deep relationships and work career success. If you take the time to build a true relationship with a millennial or a generational Z, I think you'll be highly surprised at how that may change their workplace behavior, because they are starting to feel welcome there and feel those bonds. So some facilities to generate cross-generational success. And again, default statement, in the longer workshop, we would focus also on how to work with the other generations, because it's not just how do we deal with millennials. We need to learn how to deal with everybody. But it's so important because obviously this is diversity, and you want diverse teams in age as well as anything else, because that's going to make your teams stronger, bring more to the table, etc. So again, I would normally go a little bit more in depth before this part on that. So some strategies. Again, I just kind of mentioned this on building relationships.
I'm not
but,
sure.
Sorry, Siri thought I was talking to her there. Is find common ground, get to know them, show them that you care, again, on a professional basis, but really spend some time trying to kind of seed those relationships and grow those relationships. A big one, manage expectations. Set clear expectations from day one. Never downplay a negative aspect of a job, okay? Even in hiring, just be upfront about those things and they will accept that. It's more so once they're into a job and there's something that they weren't expecting that might not be the most glamorous, that you can sometimes run into problems. And a big thing to use is roadmaps. So again, if you can sit down and roadmap out what, and it doesn't have to be overly in depth, but you know, if you're a good employee for a year, maybe we'll cross train you on this. You know, usually at 3 years is when we issue raises. Here is kind of what our succession plan looks like. And if you ever did want to move up here, these are the skills that you would need as well. Just laying that out from day one so that they know if they work, here's the transaction that they're going to get back. And you have to remember to do that. And you have to somewhat agree to giving those transactions back. But that will alleviate so much of the thoughts around they're trying to take my job or this or that, and also keeping them happy and engaged. If they know they're working towards that next transaction, they're going to work. And so the last one is the SICK technique. And this can be used in explaining tasks. This can also be used in correction and supervisory roles. And the SICK technique is specific, impactful, and questions. And so come in, again, I'm going to go back to the on-time example. Be very specific about what the issue is or what the expectation is. So, you know, the expectation is that you are here and ready to start working at X amount of time. The impactful, the why, that's the why. Why it's so important for you to be here on time is A, so your team members aren't held up. B, we lose this much in ROI if you are not here and working, you know. C, customer service. Our customers expect that if they call right now, somebody's going to be here to answer the phone. Whatever that looks like, really break it down into those whys and how it impacts the person, their coworkers, and the business as a whole. And then questions. Open up that dialogue. Again, this is more towards the relationship piece. Make them feel comfortable. Do you understand what I'm saying? Make sure that they do, that they acknowledge that, and you give them the opportunity to ask any questions. Again, and in the full day, we would actually break this down and practice quite a few of these to kind of get the hang of it, but it's a great, great technique. So that's the end. I think I was right at about my 25 to 30 minutes, but I'm happy to take questions, have any discussion, and thank you for having me and listening to me.
Thank you. That's a nice presentation. It's the second time I've seen it and I really enjoy the information. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad you came back. I'm sorry that.
No, I appreciate seeing it. I try to tell a lot of people about your presentation and how informative it is. So getting it a second time and getting it recorded is even better. So thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Did anyone have any questions for Leslie?
Looks like we might have. Is this a question in the chat? Okay. So Karen, I see your comment. And that's a fair comment, I think. But again, I would say that you may not feel that you should have to explain that. And I completely understand where you're coming from. But I would still try it. You might be surprised. If you just take that few minutes that, you know, and if you don't want to, that's fine. But,
all right.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting in this time that we're living right now, like my whole work dynamic has changed. Even though I was at work in an office, I was usually outside of the office more than I was in, just because I was always doing community outreach and working with the public. Now with COVID, I'm now more in my home than I am in any other location. So I think in going toward what you were speaking about, as a business owner or as an employer, explaining to employees, is there flex time? Are you flexible to different types of work shift? Are you rigid? Do you have to work these hours and only these hours are acceptable? Being clear and upfront in the beginning will make a change, because then that person has to decide, you know, am I the 8 to 5er, or do I need something that's a little bit more flexible because of family or other obligations that I have to deal with? So I think that's true in any case, but I appreciate you going over that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, this, what we're living through right now will probably significantly change a whole lot of this, because in some industries, um, people are working completely from home, and that's a whole new ballgame in managing individuals, what those expectations are. Are they staying engaged? Because there is definitely, if you're working from home and virtually, you have to have at least some level of self-motivation and some of those, you know, skills to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing every day. So it will be very interesting as hopefully they start coming back to offices, and kind of how that changes. And Karen, I was just thinking of something, you know, and again, in my, you know, there's memes, okay? So everybody knows what a meme is, right? That I see my friends post all the time about, like, me showing up late at work with my Starbucks, you know, and like, it's almost, I mean, to some, it has become a joke that I'll just be late to work all the time, right? So I'm not saying that it's right by any means, but I'm saying that it is, for some reason, ingrained in some of us. And sometimes I wonder why, right? We had to be at school on time. We had to do things on time growing up. So what did cause that to become an acceptable thing, right? I've heard stories about people on their first day of their job showing up literally a half an hour late and saying, oh, well, I didn't know I had to be here right at that time. I mean, it is hard to understand and grasp, but it's an issue and a problem. And again, I don't think that you need to babysit, and I think you need to still give them only one chance, right? But again, it's more of that setting that expectation. The expectation is that you're here at this time. And it is frustrating sometimes. I mean, I've been frustrated with individuals of my same age or close to that I've managed, because it can be different. Because, you know, I've had people who have asked for a lot of goals and roadmaps, and I have found myself getting frustrated before. Like, I don't necessarily have the time to do this, but I have to stop and think, Leslie, you know that this is going to, in the end, help them and make them a better and a more engaged employee. So, you know, it's not easy or necessarily comfortable, but can sometimes help.
Leslie, I've got a question, if I could. Maybe it's too early to know, but have you found or heard that some generations have done better than others with the COVID crisis and the working from home, as far as being on task and attentive and that kind of thing while they're quarantined, locked down?
You know, I haven't, at least not from a generational standpoint. But I will say, I think that that's very hard and almost unfair to gauge, because I've seen some articles come out, right, about we're failing at the great work from home experiment and things of that nature. But right now, it's very different than if we were just saying, okay, we're a company and life is normal on the outside, but we're going to work from home, right? Because people are juggling right now parenting and school and, you know, the fear of a pandemic, or they know somebody that's sick. There's so many other factors right now. You know, if I were generally just working for a company that said, hey, we're going to work from home, I would be working, my son wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be parenting at the same time. I wouldn't be doing all these things on top. So I think if they do look into it in that realm, I personally would feel like that would still be very skewed towards which generations happen to have the youngest kids at home, et cetera, at this time. So to me, I think it'll be more interesting when we do come back, what we start to see at that point.
Great question, Donna. Anybody else?
Do you really think we'll start working back in offices or just stay at
At some
home?
point, I sure hope at some point.
I know I saw that Synchrony Bank has decided to keep everybody at home working.
Yeah.
Won't be going back to the office in Kettering.
And I can tell you from a State Department, I heard that all their employees are continuing to work from home through the end of the year. So they're going to reevaluate it in 2021.
Yeah, we're now we have some classes at Clark State that are running in person, but as few as we can. Honestly, anything that can be done from home is being done from home. But from a staff perspective, we've been told at least through February at this point that we'll be at home. So it's it will look differently, no doubt about that. But again, even like with the Synchrony example, I would assume at some point they would have some rules around what working from home looks like. I think right now, most people that are working from home are doing so without a whole lot of guidelines because of the situation that we're in. And thank goodness most or all employers, at least that I've dealt with, have been very understanding about that, with having kids at home, et cetera. I think at some point they would say, okay, and this would, who knows how long that'll be, right? Kids can be fully in school or daycares are open at full capacity, et cetera. But I do think at some point, even if you're working from home, that will no longer be okay. Yeah, who knows when that will be.
And I think it also changes on the type of segment of business that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking a lot about how essential workers, the frontline workers, were all medical, but really our, food service, our trash collectors, everybody that, was blue collar was still working. They didn't have an option to come home. Mm-hmm. And so I think the dynamic has shifted of, what's important, white or blue collar workers. Well, they all are, because we noticed that we still had to keep going, as an economy and as a business standpoint, everybody had their job to keep everybody working toward a solution. So I think hopefully in my aspect, I hope appreciation for those that have continued to work through this crisis and putting themselves on the line. I'm hoping that has stepped up in their appreciation for what they do, because nobody's job is less important than the other. We all have our piece in that cog of the wheel, if you will, to make us keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a, not necessarily a generational aspect, getting kind of off topic here, but from a workforce aspect, which I think we'll see some very interesting shifts that might be good for us. A lot of people that are in food service, retail, et cetera, people that we never thought, that their jobs would be in jeopardy or they would be in the situation that they were, will probably start looking at those essential jobs that didn't. So we're talking about our manufacturing pipelines, our skills pipelines, things that have been issues for a lot of employers in the past. I think it's a really prime time to finally start getting some of our underemployed folks skilled into those positions. So that's a little workforce silver lining, I think, from this. And I think we'll also see people specifically looking for jobs that A, were essential and kept working, or B, were able to transition to virtual
I'm just
Thank you.
curious from the group, who besides Leslie, because I think you might be the only millennial, do the rest of us identify as Gen Xers? Yes or no? Yeah.
I'm 53. This is Delaney. I'm 53. So I'm kind of I think I'm on the border, aren't I? Is that X and Y being 53 between X and Y?
Were you born after
I
65?
was going to say I'm really bad at math. I don't know what year that was.
67. I was born in 67.
You're an Xer.
You're an X. Yep.
Welcome to the club, Delana.
Excellent. See, that's what we should do. Excellent.
Xer. And thank you,
Old,
Leslie,
I'm a baby
for the
boomer.
presentation. I'm sorry. What'd you say, Karen?
I'm old, I'm a baby boomer.
Well, you look fabulous. Wow. So do you know that. I would have never guessed. Here we are.
Yeah, you look way younger than me, hence why my camera's not on. So yeah, you're great.
Well, that kind of goes into my part. I was thanking Leslie for our presentation. I felt that it was very informative. I really enjoyed learning more about each generation. As part of Generation X myself, I'm supporting 2 baby boomers in my family, both my mother and my grandmother. And as well as I've raised a millennial and I'm currently raising a Generation Z. So I think this information can even benefit families in how to communicate with each other and be more aware of perpetuating some of these stereotypes. And maybe we can even fortify those in our families and prepare them to how to work with others of different generations in the workforce.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned before, the lovely meme of okay boomer, it's like, don't second guess someone just because they're older or maybe if not of your generation. They may still have something very important to say and something to teach you. I know I've learned a lot from my grandmother, and she's 91, and she learned how to email before my 67-year-old mother did. So, go figure on generations. Some of them may not want to learn, but that's their individual aspect. That's not necessarily part of their generation. It's their change in attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know we're wrapping up here, but the half-day workshop that this is really spends time in that space, right? Because it's not just an older generation to millennial issue, right? Millennials have to respect everybody else too. And at some point, you've got to get deeper into people just being people and looking at those traits versus stereotyping. So all very, very true and valid points, Shannon.
Well, thank you. It was truly great to see everyone today as we stayed physically distant, but we weren't socially distant. So it was awesome to see everybody, and thank you for joining us. I want to make sure everyone's on the lookout for our upcoming e-weekly email. It'll talk about our next month's speaker and topic, and it will be coming to you live on the 3rd Thursday of October. Actually, October the 15th. So it's early in the month because the 1st is a Thursday. So beware, it's not going to be later in the month. 3rd Thursday will come upon you quickly than you realize. I would like to close today by providing each of one of you a quote. It is from one of my favorite writers, Maya Angelou. And she said that if you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. So have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.